Thanks, Corla. I think there's a certain irony that the Times Person of the Year were journalists yesterday, when there hasn't been a single mention of the growing precarious situation facing Julian Assange. And I want to put it to the government that there's a responsibility on us to raise this case in the upcoming European Council, because in a fortnight Julian Assange will have spent his 7th Christmas trapped in the Ecuadorian embassy in London. For 6.5 years he's been corralled there by the British government, refused safe passage to asylum in Ecuador. He's now an Ecuadorian citizen, and still the British government refuses to let him leave in safety. And the threats to his life and his health grow bigger every day. Since the election of Moreno in Ecuador last year, his presence in the Ecuadorian embassy has grown increasingly precarious. He has described Assange as a stone in his shoe, and former President Carrera has said that Moreno would throw Assange out at the first pressure from the United States, and that is exactly what we are seeing. In November, the US Justice Department accidentally revealed the existence of sealed criminal charges against Assange in a document filed in a New York court. That document read, "The complaint and arrest warrant would need to remain sealed until Assange is arrested in connection with the charges in the criminal complaint and can therefore no longer evade or avoid arrest and extradition in the matter." Now, we must remember that this threat of extradition to the US and a lifetime of solitary confinement, or worse, hangs over Julian Assange because he had the audacity to commit acts of actual journalism, the audacity to refuse to become just another stenographer of the powerful, like so many of his colleagues, because he made information available that threatened the United States imperial project, information that upset the liberal consensus of Western good guys and the big bad others that we hear about so much. Information that was raw, genuine and direct from the source, not spoon-fed by spokespersons or laundered by PR. And he is now facing criminal charges in the United States because in 2010 he published the collateral murder video, which showed the US forces gunning down 12 civilians, including 2 journalists, in an airstrike and laughing about it. He's facing criminal charges and a lifetime in solitary in a supermax prison because a few short months later WikiLeaks published the Afghan war logs, followed not long after that from the Iraq war logs, the biggest military leak in the military history of the United States. And the Iraq war logs proved that the US government had covered up some 15,000 civilian deaths in Iraq, and that the US authorities had failed to investigate hundreds of cases of abuse, torture, rape and even murder by Iraqi police and soldiers, killed hundreds of unarmed civilians, some of them pregnant women, for the crime of approaching checkpoints. And I have to say, in light of Assange's contribution to journalism, it is a grim and very shocking situation how easily the United States, along with their allies in the UK, have manipulated mainstream opinion in this regard, including, I'd have to say, media opinion from left to right indeed, in regard to both his character and his work. And what we've had is a relentless propaganda campaign over the years to basically a sort of a universally recognised idea in the mainstream that his detention is really something not really to worry about. It's not really that important because, sure, look, everybody knows he's unstable, he's irresponsible, creepy, whatever you're having yourself, which is exactly why I'm raising it today. Because human rights don't depend on character references. The world's media was rightly up in arms about the horrific murder of Jamal Khashoggi on the basis that state-backed attacks on dissident journalists are a red line that should never be crossed. I agree with that. But, you know, if Assange is ever talked about these days, it's sort of never in the context of his Arbery detention. It's rather in the context of the smears against his character. And to me, that's an absolute hypocrisy when we see the situation, the sort of outcry now over the treatment of Khashoggi and so on. A journalist has been arbitrarily detained for 6.5 years with no apparent discomfort from any section of the establishment anywhere. And I really would ask the government, again, not for the first time, to raise this case before this man dies inside that embassy, or if they get him out, he faces a lifetime in solitary confinement in America. And I do think, in the context of journalists, there is a hypocrisy between how we raise the cases of Khashoggi and then at the same time refuse to countenance arms boycotts on Saudi Arabia as it slaughters and starves innocent Yemeni civilians for 3 years until that murder. Suddenly now everybody in Europe wants to talk about it. Didn't care about it when the Yemenis were being killed, and incidentally a figure of 60,000 yesterday in the media. So I would really appeal to the government to speak up before it's too late in the case of Julian Assange.